Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite here. Back at you with a few more thoughts. For anybody that's been around in the prepper community, the survivalism, bushcrafting, you've probably heard of the rule of threes. 3 days without, or 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Well, I'm going to add another dimension to the rule of threes, so stick around. And that new dimension is PSB. For every critical system that you've got, you should have PSB. A primary, a secondary, and a backup. So we'll talk about 3 minutes without air. That's going to be kind of tough, but let's just assume for the purposes of this discussion that you've got, that you're in the Northwest and you're experiencing all the forest fires and wildland fires that are going on up there, and the air quality is pretty well shot. So what should you be doing? Well, your primary response should be, well, maybe not even be there, but the primary response is, if you are there, that you should probably at least have a cloth mask that's wet. That'll help filter out some of the smoky particulates and things like that. May make it a little bit easier to get through the dilemma that you're in. Your secondary system would be an N95 type mask that's really rated for that kind of stuff. And then your final backup could possibly be either an N100 type mask or a firefighter style respirator. So you've got 3 kinds of things going for you. You've got a primary, you got a secondary, and you got a backup. Now, however you want to order those for yourself, that's going to be up to you. But a critical system, you got to have air, because in these kinds of situations, it's really going to be necessary to be able to continue on. So that's why you need not only a primary, but a secondary and a backup. So remember, 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3's even better. So let's move on to 3 hours without shelter. Now, I'm assuming that you're in a harsh environment when they say stuff like that. 3 hours if you're out in a snowstorm, if you're in oppressively hot weather with no shelter at all, you're going to need, this is a critical system, so you're going to need a primary, which I think would be, are you dressed properly? In the winter time, are you dressed in the proper layers? You got with wool socks or gloves, waterproof shoes and boots, things like that. So your primary is, are you dressed properly? Without shelter. Now, this is where we are. You should have as a secondary your fire kit. You're going to need a way to build a fire. If you're going to be exposed to the really rough conditions out in the middle of a snowstorm or whatever, you've got to be able to stay warm. So I would make sure that as part of your secondary that you've got at least a lighter and maybe some tinder and some fuel, some dry wood or something, so you can get a fire started, and then getting it started in the right place and all that kind of stuff. But that's your secondary. And your final backup should be you shouldn't find yourself in a situation where you're exposed to the elements without being prepared. So in your bug out bag, in your get home bag, in your emergency vehicle kit, you should have enough gear to get you through an exposure without shelter, so that you can last for more than that guideline 3 hours in a harsh environment. So in that bug out bag and vehicle emergency kit, a sleeping bag, a bivy, minimum a blanket, a tarp so that you can erect some sort of temporary cover for shelter, and maybe a camp stove or a backpacker's style stove so that you can use that for an alternate source of heat. So the next is 3 days without water. That's pretty tough. A human body can't exist without hydration for a long period of time, and they're saying that 3 days kind of is a guideline for that kind of a thing. Well, here at the homestead, our primary is the municipal water supply. We're hooked up to the municipal water system. Turn on the faucet, the water comes out. It's monitored very carefully by the Municipal Water Authority, and it's good to drink. It's not too bad. It's always there, never been without. So that's our primary system for water. We do have a backup home supply just in case. So our secondary would be our home supply, which is bottled water, stuff that you buy in a little plastic jugs from the supermarket or wherever you get it. And we've got a few cases of that to back up for drinking water. We've got a number of 5 and 7 gallon water jugs that we fill up and keep on hand. So we've probably got pretty close to 100 gallons stored in the 5 and 7 gallon water jugs, containers, whatever. And we've got a couple of 55 gallon water barrels that we have filled up with rainwater. So our backup system is our 275 gallon water tote that we've got for a rainwater catchment system. It's the repository or the tank for the rainwater catchment system. Now, that's going to get us into, yeah, you're not supposed to drink water that's come off your roof, because the birds are pooping on it up there on the roof, and you got all kinds of stuff, algae may be growing, all that. So to make the water potable, you're also going to need, and here's a critical system, you're going to need the new rule of 3's for that. Your primary, and every time that there's ever an issue with a municipal water supply, what's the first thing that they recommend? Boil your water. So have a way to boil your water. Hopefully it's just temporary, but you need to boil your water, and that's should be basically your primary. And do you have the right equipment to do that kind of stuff? You got a way to build a fire, you got a way to turn on the stove, you got a propane tank, you got a Weber kettle, something that you can use to boil water in or on. Your secondary system should be bleach or iodine tablets, possibly even a life straw kind of a thing to make that water potable. If you're collecting it from rainwater catchment, then there you go. That's going to be the right way to deal with it. If you're out in the wilderness and you find it come on a stream, a lake, or a pond, and you dip some water out of there, you're going to want to make sure that you've got a way to make that potable so that you can actually enjoy it and drink it, and it doesn't do harm to you. And the final backup that we use here is a Berkey water system. We've got a big Berkey. Can't tell you how many gallons it is, but you know, it's not a whole lot. maybe 3.5 or 4 gallons, I'll check. And it's got really, really fine water filtration, water purification kind of stuff. We've used it for a long, long time. We've had it for a long, long time. It's always been reliable. So there's the backup, the third leg of the stool that you're going to need to make sure that you've got potable water to drink. Now we're talking about 3 days without food. 3 days without food, or three weeks without food, sorry. So now we're talking 3 weeks. There we go, 3 weeks without food. So what you've got, primary for us here at this homestead is what we call fresh food. Stuff that you pick up out of your garden, that you can harvest out of there, the tomatoes, the peppers and all that, when it's in season. And then you can can it or freeze it so that you've got it in the off season. So in the winter time when your garden's not producing anything, you've got some backup food that's fresh. You know where it came from, you put it up yourself, so you should be able to trust it just fine. You can also have frozen food that you pick up at the supermarkets. You can use canned food, all that. So your primary source of food is going to be either fresh food, frozen, or canned. So your secondary should be a stockpile of dehydrated or freeze-dried food, the kind of stuff that you get from Wise Foods or wherever, Emergency Essentials, For Patriots, any of those kind of places that supply us with the freeze-dried and dehydrated foods that need to be reconstituted. That is a great secondary. And your backup should be your long-term storage, your bulk storage, things like rice and beans and pasta and flour, stuff that you've got put up, 5-gallon buckets, vacuum sealed in Mylar bags, all that, so that you've got a viable backup. For how long? That's going to be up to you. I can't determine what your rate of exposure may be where you are, but for here, we're trying to make sure that we've got at least 1 year's backup for my wife and me for that kind of staple food, rice and beans and pasta and flour and yeast and things like that that we're going to need in case the S does hit the fan. So you've got your food. How you going to cook it? How you going to prepare it? Well, our primary here is our stove in our kitchen. Got a electric stove. Unfortunately, the gas stoves around here are just way too expensive to get installed. There isn't a reliable source of natural gas that's inexpensive enough to make it worthwhile. Last time we checked, it was going to cost almost $1,000 to get the gas line run, and then it would be another $700 or $800 for the stove itself, and then another probably $600 to $800 to hook it all up. So not sure that that was really going to be worth the investment when we've got other options available. So for us, it's an electric stove. For you, it may be a gas stove, which is just great. I'd rather have a gas stove than an electric, but that's our primary food preparation tool. Secondary would be our Coleman camp stoves, our propane barbecue that we've got out on the deck, the Weber kettle, charcoal cooker that we keep right next to the picnic table. So we've got a good array of secondaries for being able to cook the food that we have out there. And the final backup for cooking food would be an open fire or even a sun oven. Now, I checked into sun ovens and they're pretty expensive. $300 to $500 for a sun oven. But if you've got a wood lot, if you've got some firewood cut, and you've got a way to safely build an outdoor fire that you can cook on, that's going to be your backup. So I just wanted to make sure that we were really looking at the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in a harsh environment, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. But to look at those kinds of critical systems and to make sure that we apply a new rule of threes with your primary system, a secondary system, and a backup system. And if you like these videos, please click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with your friends. This is the Prepared Suburbanite, reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.